thank you all for coming. I know that you have lots and lots of choices, and we really appreciate you, but hopefully other people come visit us at our booth, because we've got good swag, huh? So we've tried to put together a collection of different things that what the dogs are doing. So it's going to give you kind of a broad idea of what's happening in archaeology and dogs. And first up is our very own Ms. Lisa Lee, who's going to give you the overview of what the heck this dog stuff is all about.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to go through some jargon first. You may not hear it in the presentations, but you'll certainly hear it in the field if you work with dogs. So the first thing is HHRDD, or HHRD dog, and that's a historic human remains detection dog. That is a dog that specializes in locating the odor of the later stages of decomposition. This is different from a cadaver dog or even an HHRD dog. We'll talk about a little bit about that later. So the target odor is what a detection dog is trained to locate. So again, for HHRD dogs, that is the later stages of decomposition. If you've been to our booth and you said cadaver dog and I jumped out of my skin at you, cadaver dogs are trained on the earlier stages of decomposition. So our dogs are specifically those later stages. So an alert is a dog's response to finding their target odor. You also might hear trained final response, TFR, or indication. POD, or probability of detection, I think most people get that. And that's just how likely is the dog to find something in an area. I'll talk a little bit later about what can affect our dog's POD. So the answer to all questions HHRD dog. So this is everything you need to know. This is always the answer. Sorry, it's true. People who ask me questions in the booth, I'm like, yeah, sorry, it depends. So now that that's out of the way, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how HHRD dogs work. And again, how dogs work, it depends. So it depends on the goal of the project, it depends on the conditions, it depends on the team, right? But I'm going to talk about some basics. So this is Cleo and her handler, Joseph. I asked for a quick video, and I really got a quick video. This is not how dogs work when they're working acres, making their acres. So dog teams work to cover an area, and we think of it as a dance. The handler's leading the dance, the dog is following the dance until the dog gets into odor, and then the dog drives to odor. I can tell you she just hit odor, she turned left, she's narrowing down, that's her alert. So they were dancing to find the odor, the dog works with its nose as close as possible to the source, and for us, that's on the surface. And then the dog does an alert. For us, the alert is, and then, sorry, see, she's going too fast. For us, the alert is non-destructive, and we call it a passive alert. So it's usually a sit or down, something like that. And then after they alert, they get a reward, and that's her reward. So why do we use dogs, specifically for historic and pre-contact human remains? So the first thing is it's a unique sensor. There's no other tools that archaeologists have available to them that are detecting the odor of the later stages of decomposition, human decomposition. So we can provide a piece to the puzzle that no other tool can. Dogs, again, non-invasive, non-destructive. They're also very fast, and I'll be super blunt and say fast means cheap compared to other tools. So if we think about it as compared to GPR, the GPR can do an acre a day. It's less post-processing. A dog can do an acre an hour, right? And that doesn't mean that that's not always, but that's actually how we calculate our bids. And you can use dogs in a couple of different ways, right? One thing you can do is say, I have this huge area. Can you narrow down this area? Like, I don't need you to pinpoint the graves, but can you narrow down this area so me as an archaeologist who's going to excavate, or GPR, or some other resource, now you just have to work this small corner, not the huge area. So dogs can also indicate when there's no grave. And that can be, just depending on the soil, there's no grave shaft, or it literally could be that it's a surface scatter of cremains, right? Again, other tools aren't going to be able to find things like that. They also have 4-paw drive. So I challenge anybody to get a GPR card there, right? So they can get places, they can go over things and navigate things that other tools can't. And also where there's very little trust between people or between cultures, dogs are viewed as unbiased. So a culture that might not trust a person can trust a dog. And as you can see in the picture, dogs can also provide solace. So what do HHRD dogs alert on? So the first thing we talked about a little bit already, the odor of the later stages of decomposition, right? So we have our odor here, the volatiles are coming up, the vapor's coming up, the dog locates the source of where the vapor's coming out, the strongest point, and alerts. They may or may not be able to tell you the exact location of the wood piece. So this is our nemesis. We call it the conduit effect. And it could be tree roots, it could be rodent warrens, but in this case, someone put a conduit right through human remains. And odor follows a path of least resistance. So what that odor is going to do is follow where the soil was disturbed, run along the pipe, come up. My dog is probably going to alert where the utility box meets the surface, because that's where most of the odor is. There may be odor right above the human remains, but that's going to be less. And so our dogs are taught to find the strongest concentration. That's going to be the utility box. So whenever we see utility boxes, we say bad words. They will not alert on non-human remains, and they will not alert on artifacts. The only exception is that the artifact is a funerary artifact, so it has absorbed the odor of human remains. In that case, they will alert on them, and we found out that problem. So, impacts on HHRD dogs' efficacy. So the first thing is dogs may not be socially acceptable. And if dogs aren't in the field, zero efficacy. I know this is a hard slide to understand, but the next thing is vegetation. So if you have tall vegetation, the first thing that happens is the dog picks their nose up because they're protecting their eyes. Remember, we want our dog's noses to be as close as possible to the source. So if the dog's nose is up in the air, it's going to be harder for them to find. Also, when there's really tight vegetation, the odor doesn't spread out until it gets above the vegetation. And so, you have this little tiny piece of, plume of odor that comes up, and so the dog has to get their nose right on it in order to be able to detect it. So that means if we're going to work this, we have to have the dog work. We don't work grids per se, but they have to work very tight spacing, or they're not going to find that odor. So the next thing, and again, our nemesis, unbroken pavement. So, our odor's coming up, this is pavement. It's an oil seal. A dog can walk right on top of the body. I always tell people, if you ever want to murder somebody, I've not found, put them underneath a paved road. Dogs, they just won't find the odor. The odor might, if it's a narrow road, might spread out and get to the edge, and the dogs might be able to detect it on the edge. They will walk right over the body. The other thing very similar to this is the type of soil. How permeable is it? I know you all are soils people, and you understand permeability of water going down. So think about vapor coming up. It's the same thing in the opposite direction. The vapor has to get to the surface and into the air to be able to get to the dog's nose for them to be able to detect. So other things is weather. So ground temperature, we stop working when the ground temperature, not the air temperature, but when the ground temperature is above 100 degrees. And it's not because the dogs get hot, it's true, but it's because it makes the odor undetectable to dogs. Very high humidity at ground level creates a seal. Standing water, active rain, things like that. Other things that can affect efficacy are funerary customs. I talked about the surface scatter of remains. Our dogs can do that, but that is going to affect their efficacy. That is harder to find. Also, if the dog or the handler become exhausted, their efficacy goes down, right? Another thing that really affects general efficacy, not necessarily a team's efficacy, but the selection of team. Like selecting a team that specializes in this, they're going to be more effective than a dog that, again, trains on the earlier stages of decomposition. So what to tell you as archaeologists, what should you tell your canine resource? So the first thing is, what's the area? Where do I need to search? We all do GPSs. You can send us a sketch, but you can send us shape files, you can send us tracks, you can send us KLMs, like whatever you want to send us. But you need to tell us where we're going to search because we're going to use a GPS to search it. The other thing we want to know is what areas are priority, right? We want to know the current conditions. So this is actually a real search, and when we show it, the pictures we got, vegetation was super low. And we showed up, it looked like this. We were not super effective. So we want to have current conditions of the terrain, the vegetation. We want to know the history of the area. Was it agriculture? Any of those things help us to work our dogs in a more effective way. And again, what are the funerary practices of the people that we might be looking for? Are we looking for cremains? Are we looking for somebody that was buried, inhumation, maybe 3 feet deep? Again, that will affect how we search and our search strategy. So tell us what the time constraints are. We need to have this done by June because they're going to build on it. Also the time constraints of the day or anything like that. What's the long-term purpose of the area? Is it going to be developed? Do you just want to be able to protect any remains that are located? What's the long-term, why are we there? Why do you want us to look for things? And also, what is the dog's goal? And I know that seems strange, right? Well, I want you to find the human remains. But are you looking to do double-blind research? Are you looking to find the boundaries of a cemetery? Are you looking to find as many individual human remain spots with human remains that we can? We're going to have a different strategy for those 3 use cases that I rattled off. So where I live, many of you have already heard the story. The next town over had a cemetery that was established in the 1800s, and it's still in use today. The wooden markers are gone, and the record's burned. Right? So they asked us to come out and literally work the dogs and say, occupied, occupied, vacant, occupied, because they wanted to know where they could bury modern people, right? And again, that's a very specific way of working, right? Versus finding boundaries. So also please tell us about the hazards and think about dog hazards, right? So some of these things you might be like, what's that, right? Hot wires, really bad for dogs. Prickly bushes, right? And it's not just like that's uncomfortable, they will get in their eyes and we're gonna go home, right? Pesticides, things like that. Another thing is livestock, neighbors who aren't friendly or might have an unfriendly dog. So any of those things we want to know about ahead of time. And also if there is required PPE that we should wear, we want to know that. So I'm going to run through some frequently asked questions. We are in booth 104, and if you have other questions that I don't get to, we have time at the end of the symposium, but you can always come up and ask us. So the first question, my favorite question, is how old of human remains can you find? So this is a SAA peer-reviewed paper that documents the oldest human remains find of a dog that I know of, and it was found to be over 9,000 years old.
Lisa here with a post-processing comment. This paper, Applying Canine Detection in Support of Collaborative Archaeology, is in SAA's Advances in Archaeological Practices, Volume 9, Number 3, August 2021. You can find it on our webpage, icfcanine.org, under the News and Pubs section, then select Published Papers. It also has a very useful section on selecting an HHRD search team. It lists some questions you can ask to help ensure a resource is qualified to do this special work and will provide the best possible result. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
How do you train them? And this is the same for every kind of detection dog. It's Pavlov. Right? So you pair their target odor. It doesn't matter if that's historic human remains. It doesn't matter if that is drugs or bombs. Right? You pair their target odor to their favorite thing on the planet. When you find the thing I want you to find, you get, right? For my dog, it's a ball. For some dogs, it's food, whatever. And that's a super simple answer that I just gave you. It is way more complex than that to actually get a dog that's very good at this. But that is the foundation, right? How long? So how long does it take? Depends. So it depends on the experience of the handler, depends on how old the dog is, blah, blah, blah. But generally a year to year and a half to have a certified field-ready dog. Plus, once you certify, you have to continue to train and do certifications after that. So for our team, every 6 months, there's a set of skills or tests or assessments that you have to do and pass. Which breed? Of course, how could you not? Right? You may have figured out that I'm a Labrador handler. But the real answer again is it depends, right? The most important thing, in my opinion, is that the dog and the handler click. We are a team, right? The puppy that's sitting in front of John, I think, is going to grow up to be an awesome dog. Do not want to live with that dog. I am not a border collie person, right? I'm a type A person. I need to work the class clown, right? So first you need to find the dog that you really feel like you're gonna have a good relationship with, right? It's like finding a spouse, right? The next thing is we tend to select breeds from working, I won't say working lines, but working breeds. And that doesn't mean they're purebreds, right? They can be mixed breeds, but they tend to come from hunters, herders, things like that. So if you go downstairs and look at our picture board, you'll see border collies, Labradors, German Shepherds, Malinois, Aussies, cattle dogs. Who did I forget? I'm not talking about terriers. And above, the other thing is, like in general for breeds, we don't pick sight hounds. So that's greyhounds, Salikis, things like that. Because again, our dogs are taught to work with a person. Greyhounds are taught to hunt with their eyes, bred. Right? That's why you see them on the track chasing like the fake rabbit, because they see it. They're like little velociraptors, right? So that's how we choose a dog, or choose a breed. So I talked about this a little bit earlier. This is not, it depends, right? Our dogs do not alert on non-human remains. We specifically train that. And again, Pavlov. If my dog goes over and says, well, this is an interesting pig bone, I'm like, that's nice. They don't get paid, right? They're very selfish. So do we travel? Yes. This is my favorite travel story. So National Geographic put us on a plane to Fiji and then out in the Pacific for 4 days?
No.
3 days?
5 days.
5 days.
The island.
And then in a little Zodiac to get out to a little atoll to look for Amelia Earhart. So yes, we travel. I'll do one more quick thing. So how did we realize dogs can do this? So Adela is our founder, and many of us have search and rescue backgrounds. Her dog was cadaver trained, earlier stages of decomposition, early to odor. And we were in an area where there was a cemetery, historic cemetery from the early 1900s. Many of the burials were from the San Francisco area. And she walked by and just said, I wonder. And so she sent her dog, and I'll be super frank, she had a badass dog at the time. A lot of dogs could not do this. So her dog, again, earlier stages of decomposition, her dog was able to make the leap and connect that and went into the cemetery. Her alert was a touch. So she went here, and here, and here, and we all went. So that's how this whole thing got started. And that is me.